So our
Okay.
presentation tonight will be using cached ODBC connections in Access with single sign-on. And Ron McCarry is going to talk about that. I'll come back and talk about that again in a minute. But I saw a post that Ron made at Utter Access several months ago, and I thought this is something that I really want to know more about myself, and I'm sure that it'll be interesting to other people. So I asked him to share his technique with us. But before we get into the presentation, as a couple of you have already noted, Office 2024 was released on the 1st of October, and that is the perpetual license version. This is my current understanding, so if anybody has any different insights, I'd appreciate it, but this is what I understand after today. There are two versions, neither of which includes Access. There's Office 2024 Home and Office 2024 Home and Business. The main difference that I gleaned from what I was able to see is that Business includes Outlook, Home does not. And that's in line with the move to, have Outlook be a web or a browser-based application. My understanding is that there is no longer an Office Professional version for 2024. So I do not believe, Crystal, that Home and Business includes Access. I can find nothing that says it does, and everything I've seen suggests that it does not. That's why I'm asking for feedback as well.
Yeah, well, I've never known Home and Business to include Access.
Yeah.
Someone said professionals not being provided anymore or offered.
That's my understanding. And if somebody has more definitive knowledge, one of the current MVPs has more definitive knowledge, I'd appreciate it. But my understanding is that Office Professional, which did include Access, is not available for 2024.
Well, the post on Access on Access Forever, Carl's pretty much says exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. And he and I got our information from the same source, I think.
One thing I found on 365 also is it used to be if you go on their webpage, your web account for it, and looked at all the applications, Access was there. But it's not there
still
anymore.
In 365, yes.
Yeah, but for some reason it's not showing up as an application to install.
I think it's still there. I think it'll still be there.
Yeah, I mean we're publishing them, so it's not a big deal. But like I was going to install it on this computer, I had a hard time because this is not a domain computer. So,
yeah, I mean that's another part of the whole complex. Is all the various versions and install methods and everything. It makes it a much more complicated task for administrators.
Yeah.
I did want to mention you can get Access as a standalone application. I rounded it off to $180, and that is the perpetual license version for 2024. They have something called LTSC, which is aimed at commercial users. It comes with a minimum of 5 licenses, includes Access, and pricing is not published. You have to contact their sales department and negotiate, I guess. And as Ron just pointed out, some versions of Microsoft 365 include Access. Not all do, and you have to read the fine print to make sure that the one you are getting is the one you want. Now, this is my personal opinion. I think we can take this in a positive way. You can look at it as a negative or as a positive. I think it's a positive look, and this is why. Microsoft has decided that in order to entice more people to switch from the perpetual license to the subscription license, they would offer Access only in the prescription version or the subscription version as an incentive for you to abandon the perpetual license and move to Microsoft 365. I see that as offering Access as a value added by subscribing, as opposed to something that they've taken away on the desktop side. Not everybody is going to agree with that interpretation, but that's the way I prefer to look at it today. Some other things, the roadmap That quieted everybody down. Are you mulling your responses to that?
We're all muted
Oh, you're all muted. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
because
great.
you're presenting, George.
Okay. Well, you don't have to necessarily mute. I just don't want the video running.
Oh, I don't. In that case, I don't see that there's a lot of. I can follow your reasoning, but I don't think it makes a lot of sense. If they were going to do that, they would have M365 as including access, whereas it's still optional in 365. I think it's because I'm afraid to say I think it's because they've minimized the importance of access yet again.
Yeah, that's the alternative, and like I say, I prefer to take an optimistic view, but I certainly could be wrong. I have been before, more than once. Some notes on the roadmap. It still shows these 3 items. Modern chart improvements are now in the current channel. I have seen them both on 32 and 64-bit, played with it a little bit, created my first funnel chart, which worked out great. I was very happy with that. The SQL editor is still not released, pending some tender loving care based on initial feedback. And large address aware. Some questions came up today if Access 2024 will include large address awareness. Does
Apparently,
anybody have
yes.
It is, for sure.
Well, it's certainly in 365, isn't it?
It's in 365, but I think there was some ambiguity that made some people question whether it was available in the 2024 version of Access. And does anybody have any insight?
Yeah, I believe the perpetual version does include large address aware, and that actually came out 23/11.
Yeah.
So that was November last year. We got that in 365.
Yeah, that's what I thought, but apparently there's some ambiguity about that. Oh yeah, and Crystal just pointed out that 2024 does not have the new modern chart types, and I think that's also confirmed. I think they were released just before they forked the code for the branch to 2024.
I can confirm they don't. Crystal's right. It doesn't. 2024 doesn't have the modern chart types.
So all of this adds up again to another half a loaf in my view. Remind you of the Discord channel. We've talked about that every month. If anybody has anything more to say, continue to look for that if you have a mind to do that. And the last thing I wanted to talk about was our chapter organization. And this came up earlier, and I thought I would actually expand this. I was just going to talk about the fact that we have 3 new chapters. Kent's Access Express Australia chapter launched last month in September. Access Italia launches on the 8th of this month. That will be Alessandro. And Access Beginners will launch on the 15th with Juan Soto running that group. Any thoughts or comments about any of those? And of course, I'm still hoping that someone will take pity on me and let me retire.
I have a comment. I'm looking forward to all the new stuff, and Kent had a great first meeting. Yay, go Kent.
Thank you, Crystal.
Yes, it was very good.
I've decided this is we live in a constitutional monarchy, so I've decided I'm the king, not the president of Access Australia.
Well, I think since it's a self-appointed title, all of us can be our own.
Yeah,
it's good to be the king.
King Kent.
I suspect Crystal would probably prefer to be the queen, and there may be others among us as well, but I certainly would imagine Crystal would.
We can continue that discussion in another venue as well.
I posted a link for Discord for those.
Thank you.
For those that aren't in there yet,
yeah.
It would be a good idea to join. Just go over there and get yourself set up anyway.
Okay, great. So back to the presentation. As I said earlier, Ron posted a comment or a post at one point, I don't remember, several months ago, about this process. And since I had been playing around with it a little bit, with cached ODBC connections. It immediately got my attention. And so I asked him to follow up and do a presentation. And I won't try to explain what he's doing. I'll let him introduce his method to you himself. And also, Ron, if you wouldn't mind, just give us a quick background.
Yep,
And,
that's my first slide actually. So
okay, I'm going to turn the time over to you, and away we go. Thank you.
okay. Well, I'm Ron McCarry. I've been using Access since the 90s. Originally, parts lookup and bill of material to augment our existing ERP that was very hard to use, and it slowly took over most of those features. Also integrating with Autodesk products and SolidWorks products using Autodesk Lisp and VBA and C Sharp. Most of my stuff is C Sharp. That's not VBA and Access. I went to college in Wisconsin, got a BS in then computer science, numerical methods, math minor. Unfortunately, I'm not that great at math anymore. Not much need for it, my current position. And for fun, hiking, camping, kayaking, and working on my car and cruising with the wife. So have a good time up here until the snow starts, which should be about 2 weeks from now, I think. If it's anything like last year. What we're doing is we would like our application was slowly going to transition to SQL Server, and I wanted to make it more secure in that only that application would have read-write access to that database. I want to also make it secure if someone opens it up on password. So obviously cached connections is the way to go for that. But I didn't want to have a login, which one, they don't have to log in now, and two, they can log in, they can easily open up that database, Excel or Word, and edits and anything else they want to do with it. And I wanted so I wanted a single sign-on like you would get with Windows authentication, but then that would still open it up for anyone to open that database in write mode. And again, I've been told there's ways to take care of that, but again, I'm a SQL Server novice, so I don't know those ways, and this looked like a better method. And I wanted the application to handle user account maintenance, so I didn't have to go to SQL Server and manually enter new users and take old users out. So I came with this system. And I'm going to go through, I'm going to start off, I'm going to show you the demo. I got 2 Access applications, instances open. One is with the application compiled, and the other one running as a runtime implementation. So I can show you the automatic login and the fact that before you log in, I can't get to those tables without requesting a password. Then I'll show you how to set up the SQL Server. And there's 2 Access modules I'm using to manage the ODBC and the ADODB connections. And I'll step through that code during a login and adding and removing users and attaching tables. And my process showed 2 gotchas. One because the encryption method I'm using, and the other one limitations, character limitations of SQL Server connection strings. The instance on the left is compiled, hasn't been logged in yet. And the instance on the right, it was runtime, has already been logged in. And I can open the parts detail table. The compiled is exactly the same application, just not runtime. If I try to open it over here, you see it requests a login. And if I look at Link Table Manager, you can see that table's linked in using without any password or user information. And all I have to do is start up the startup form. It gets my username from the production Active Directory. This one is just getting my username off the login. And it's logged me in now. So I can now open the parts detail table. So these are SQL Server database accounts, not server accounts. So that in production, I get the username and actually check Active Directory for group membership to make sure they're allowed in, and then get the information from the server to log them in and return back a login and the type of user there are. In this form, basically a sample form, I can add more tables, I can add users and remove users and verify that they're able to log in. So the first time I connect with ODBC, it caches that connection. And that's the only connection it uses. So if I add a new user, I actually have to test it by logging in with that user. It does not change the cache, and it's not the one I'm going to be using. I'll always use the first one. Doing information on cache connections, that cache is part of the instance. So like if I close this database, and then without closing the instance, I can now open the table without logging in. So with this method, or anytime you use the cache connection, you want to make sure when the application closes, you close access. Otherwise, anybody can open a blank database and link to your SQL Server with whatever rights you had at that point. So I'll close these both down. And we'll go over to the next slide. The first step was partial containment of the database, allowing me to create database accounts. I use a database role to manage user access. They all get read-write access to that database. I put all the user management objects into its own schema, in this case JCSM. The administrator user, whose password information is stored in the front end, encrypted, can only run 6 stored procedures. It can't even look at the database, at the tables. So the user information is stored encrypted in the Access data, in the SQL Server database. You can see my user ID and password. And I do both because if you've got user IDs in your database, it can easily be read with a text reader, which will get you pretty close usually to the password. And then the set of stored procedures. There's a zip file I uploaded that has all this information, the stored procedures, and the Access sample database. So I'll go into SQL Server. Okay. So first thing I did under the database properties, options, my connection is backing up right now. Under options, I set the system to partial containment. Let's see what this thing's doing here. Okay. Sorry about this. Something slowed down the connection here. Properties. Okay, so I set up the containment type. I had 2 choices, none and partial. Partial allows me to create SQL or database accounts independent of the server. And I have a link explaining how that works and the benefits of that. Okay, so I create a JCS schema. Again, all it is to separate all those objects for user management into its own little group. So you get and all users are added to this database role. So the role has read-write access to the database. Its securables is a number of stored procedures for managing those tables. But the application, the user management application, you notice I got them all denied. In the user ID table, they can't open up either. So I explicitly deny access to that. So no one but the database administrator, user account administrator can see this information. And being as the Unix account is very, very limited access, he can run these 6 stored procedures. That's all he can do. His membership, he has no access, no rights to the database. You don't own any schemas, and his default schema is JCSM. So even if, with a normal user, he is not much to him. All, his default schema is going to be DBO, which you can set to whatever you want. He's a member of the JCS users, and which gives him these 2 rights. I don't know why these aren't grayed out, but for some reason SQL Server leaves them editable. But if I take them out of the JCS users, these 2 uncheck also, so it is managed by it. SQL Server expert have to tell me why that is. And the tables, I got it. Most of the stuff is really quite simple. There's only one weird thing I had to figure out. So this is the user access table or user ID table. And they store procedures. So when I get a password, I send it an encrypted user ID and I get back an encrypted password. Or obviously nothing, or null if that user ID doesn't exist. In a separate store procedure to add a user to the database, being as my manager account has very limited rights, it can't add a user. So I have to execute this store procedure as the owner, which is the actual database owner, manager, which is independent and not at all used by the Access database. And then I found that I can't pass the parameter. In this case, I passed the user ID and password in clear text and use it as a regular parameter query. I had to run it in dynamic SQL. So I create the user and add them to the user account. And that's all it takes, because the rest of it's handled by that user role, and that user can now do everything he needs to do with the database. Removing is just a reverse. I can't remove it because that account has no rights to that. I run as execute as owner. And just remove the account, passing it the clear text user ID. Again, only way for this. I mean, I could get rid of this requirement, but actually I think it makes it more secure, because even if you got a hold of that account, all you could do is add and remove users. And as being as the application starts up and checks the Active Directory, it's kind of difficult to make it a benefit. So that's all I had to do. Everything else is normal SQL Server. There's nothing else involved there. If I go down to the database level, you see there's only accounts is the standard SQL accounts and an account set up for the manager of the database, which I'm logged in as right. Okay. Again, I get 2 class modules. Class system, which actually existed before this, manages all my databases. So production, I use it to keep open a connection to the back end. And this one will create the ODBC connection to the SQL Server database. Class ADM, its only purpose is to use ADODB to manage those user accounts and get most of the cases just getting password back to the class system to create the connection. Basically, once it gets, so my startup form creates an instance of class system. It requests a connection or checks if it can connect to ODBC. I'll just return as true or false. That function creates an instance of the class ADM. And basically all I do is I'm asking for current user ID and password. I'm getting back the that part of the connection string. It calls the store procedure to get the password for the given user and returns that password, and then class ADM log or creates the connection. Very simple query, can't fail unless the username and password are wrong. In which case it'll fail with a trapable error. I'll return false in that case. Otherwise, I return true and close the record set. At that point, the application is logged in and it's told that the SQL Server is available. Again, right now the SQL Server is a auxiliary database, so the application can run without it. Just a couple of features will not work, but it can recover from that also. So I'll open up that same test function, but with full access. Okay, so again, you see it's not logged in. I'm going to step through the startup. So I'm going to open up the startup form. In production, this would be the automatic form that opens. And I'm in the form open event. Let me get so I create a new instance of class system, and this form stays open. So this instance stays active in the production only to access information from the control tables in the database and maintain those active connections.
Ron,
Question?
Apologies for interrupting. Could I ask you to make the code a bit bigger so it's a bit easier to see?
I don't know how to change the font on
Tools options.
Tools.
Options. Then you go to editor format.
Editor.
But these are all separate.
For normal text, just
They
push,
are,
you've got it set for 10. You can push that up to.
I normally go 14 or 16 if I'm demonstrating.
Okay.
Can't you just zoom in yourself, Adrian?
Well, how's that?
That's a lot better, thanks. You can
Okay.
do that, but then you get caught out when screens change and all the rest of it. It's a mess.
Yep.
It needs to come from the presentation, really, Ken.
Yep. This is okay. Okay, so the startup form created an instance of class system. Its initializer makes the connection to SQL, the ODBC connection, which is just another function. So I create a query and set the connection string. The connection string is a property. It's static right now. In production one, it actually gets it from a configuration file. And then it calls, if you notice, it creates an instance of class ADM and calls the function to get the user ID and password part of the connection string. So when I step into that, I get an encryption password, calls the store procedure to get that password for the given name. You know, the given name is Ron, so it's not encrypted yet. Create a new ADOB command, and again, this ADOB connection is a property. So self heals each function. If it's not open yet or not existing, it creates the connection, adds a connection string. Again, this is a property. In production, it would be pulling most of the information from the control file. So here's the property string. In this case, I get I told you the user ID and user login for the administrator is stored encrypted in the front end. So I got to decrypt it. And that's again, so if someone opens that front end as a text editor, they can't find that information easily. So now it's open, I return it. So if any other function is in this class needs that connection, it calls that same function. In most cases, it just returns the class variable holding that function. Why is this popping up? Okay. Then get the stored procedure, add the parameters, execute. And there's my encrypted password. If it fails, it returns a null string and I raise an error and drop out. And here it decrypts the password, username and password, and creates a connection string. Which now I have a connection string. I always check again if it failed, PWT equals string won't exist in that connection string, so I know it failed, and I just drop out before I trigger an error. By then, at this point, it really shouldn't fail. This is a problem with the server. Simple query, open record set, successful, return true, and close everything down. Now I'm back to the class initializer for class system. And I return this user's a normal SQL. Production has a couple more options. Back to the form open event. And I'll just open the add tables form. And now I can open parts table. I can add a table. So this is a code. Since the connection string, again, does not contain a password. So this is, I'm relying on the cache credentials for that. So minimize that, raise it. And I'll have a second table. I can verify a user. I'll just verify myself. So all I'm doing here is I'm calling the connect to SQL Server through ODBC function. Same one I called before. It's going to pass the same parameters, getting the same information from the class ADM class. So I'm going to run it through until it gets back. Attempts to log in and succeeds. I go back to the form. See, it says it's verified. If I want to add a new user, and this works in this environment because I'm not checking against Active Directory in this case. So add a user. I call the class add user with a test user. Call the same get encrypted password. Actually, I generate a random password for these things. I'll continue running through these. You've seen it all. So here's my password generator. So I create a 10 to 13 character password, and between ASCII 48 and 121, skipping these extra characters. Because limitations of the SQL Server. And once I got a password, I encrypted and decrypted, compare it to the clear text to make sure that it can be encrypted and decrypted. I've had some issues with overflow with my encryption routine. Again, it's apparently I'm the only one that sees it. Again, this time I'm using the same instance of the management class, so states open will be open, they just return, so very quick. So I'm adding the encrypted password. Edited here I'm adding the user to the database. Again, if I'm going too fast, let me know. So in this case, the user was added. And now I tested that I can connect to that user. And neat thing about this, like I said, I can add users without changing my login if I'm doing in production, because it always uses that cache connection first. So the same thing as a verify did. I log the user was added. So if I check my logs and then later today, I can see they're added here. So and remove users the same, hit remove user. I do check each step because obviously I can't always guarantee that I can remove the user from the database or from the table. So I make sure it gets done both times and undo the other if it isn't. So simple store procedure to remove the user and the from the database and from the table, and then I log that the user was removed. Questions?
There's one question in the chat.
Okay.
Adrian asked whether text decrypt is a VBA function that you created yourself.
Yes. Actually, I kind of do it two ways. I do a simple replacement with a pin.
Mm-hmm.
That's easy to, that's how I store the admin account password and information, just because it's easier to handle in text. And then I do a XOR encryption using a encryption key for the user account information.
So
And
if someone's, sorry, Ron, I thought you were finished.
Yep.
So if someone's got your database,
yep,
and the data with all the encrypted passwords and names in, what's to stop them just calling that function on the encrypted ones to get the decrypted ones?
well, if I give them this, nothing. But in the production, if you're in a commercial environment, you'd probably be running the front end compiled, so you wouldn't provide the user that capability except the administrator of the application at whoever you're dealing with. So yeah, if you got the program and it's wide open, but
you can still execute code from a database, even if you can open an MDB and get the VBA window open and execute code from another database.
even compiled.
An ACCDE.
Yeah.
And more precisely, even in an ACCDE, you can hit Control G. And
What was
you're in
that,
the
Tom?
immediate window.
Actually, you
You hit
can't.
Control what?
Watch, I opened up that other one.
But you are in a runtime environment.
No, this one, the first one I opened up, if I go into classes, it won't let me in.
I know that.
This is a compiled one.
Control G.
So obviously you wouldn't provide the ACD DB, you'd say Sublime ACDE, and then they can't see the code. They just can't open it up in the editor. I don't know, you can actually link to the database and run code.
I think you can still hit Control G.
Is that Control G for golf, Tom?
I can open Control G, but I can't.
And now you can do question mark decrypt my string in the immediate window. No, you don't have to do this. Just in the immediate window, question mark, whatever your decryption function was. Let's call it decrypt.
Yeah.
Decrypt
And
text, I
then
think it was.
open parentheses.
Yeah. So
With
they'd
a
have to know the
Y,
code
Tom.
though. How
With
would
a
they?
Y.
Yeah, it works. It works.
It would work, but they would have to know the name of the
Yeah.
procedure.
Yes, you would have to know that.
Yeah.
Right.
So I mean, I kind of put this on the scale of
Yeah.
more secure versus less secure. It's quite a ways towards the more secure side.
I agree.
More
I mean,
than,
I watched the presentation on the cache connections, and there's a way to get that password right from a second instance.
yep.
They wouldn't tell how we did that, but it was doable. So again, it's not perfectly secure, but it keeps your honest people at work from connecting to that database. I mean, I've had an engineer and he was doing something understandable, but he pulled reference to the parts detail table into Excel and started typing away, trying to make a bill of material in his own way. You know, you know, and editing data, and there's no way to stop that with an Access backend. SQL Server is far better, but I'm not good enough yet to implement it to that level.
Mhm.
If I ever am that far before I retire.
Mm.
So and this was mostly for that kind of case where you got smart people at work wanting to do something. You know, I will provide this read-only account so they can pull the data if they want to pull a list in, no problem. But they can't go editing data outside the application. And that's the big thing I was looking to do.
Yeah.
So
And does it also prevent people from, it does, you just answered that question. I'm sorry. Never mind.
well, they never see their password. They don't even know they got one. So, you know,
Yeah, that was what I was trying to ask in a stupid
Right.
way. Yeah.
yeah, because I mean, if you even the administrator of the database, if you don't, he can't know what it is. I mean, my encryption is not very strong, not extremely strong, but is enough to make it not worth the effort in most cases.
So Tom asked if this uses the ideas that Ben Clothier published in his article back in 2011. Is that?
Well, I let me pull this next step up here.
I didn't quite ask that. I indicated it'd be good to include a link to Ben's original article.
I do have some links here.
Well, the other Tom.
You're the wrong Tom.
Oh,
That was my bad. I should have distinguished which Tom I was talking about. Tom
Well, only one of
VS.
them's put a question in the chat.
Yeah. And I think both Toms are referring to the same article.
Oh,
I might have that in my link.
Yeah.
Oh, the next slide has that. I'll just
It's
go
in
over
the
the two.
chat.
Yeah, I'll go through the two gotchas I had. One, because the way I'm encrypting the username, they're now case sensitive. So like my encryption functions encrypt XORC, username, text, and an encryption key. And obviously I tested in both. You see I get a totally different text between lowercase and uppercase. So my case, I just raise all the usernames coming in to uppercase, and that's how I store them. So, because SQL Server's login doesn't care, but the database table does. But something to just watch out for. And then I always that a picture of that password generator just bypasses any of the problem characters. Again, it makes a nice, ugly little password that the user don't know and be hard to guess. Because I don't even know what it is most times. And then I always test the login because I've had cases where everything looks right, but the login didn't work. So, but it's easy to back out just by calling the undo functions and try it again. That's why I check every connection. And when I do that, when I went live, like I think 4 months ago, put in 35 users and everyone worked. So, which maybe I thought I was going to have a long couple days or a week when I did this. But so I did list some references. The first one was the original Utter Access post, and I also attached the zip file. Microsoft had a nice power tip in one of their chats on security.
That might be Ben's article because I know Microsoft published it.
Yeah, it probably is. This is very good.
Yeah.
That's Ben's article, yes.
Is that Ben's article? Yeah.
Yep.
Because this is really good. This is a really good article.
Everything Ben Clothier does is top notch, Ron.
Yeah. So then I got cache connections, and this kind of explains why application roles don't work. And we understand application roles. It kind of gives your application a login to that database. But the way Access makes the connection, it just does not work because it seems to jump all over the place and ignore those roles.
I don't think Access, is it one of them?
But
I think SQL Server stopped supporting application roles, and I don't think Access supports application roles.
No, it doesn't. This article explains them and then explains how they work and why Access won't work with it. So that's why I kind of went to this route, because if application roles work, I could just use Windows authentication and an application role, and that would lock the database to the application. Far easier.
That will start working when Armin Stein becomes the leader of Access.
Yeah.
He has been harping on this for more than a decade. It's not going to happen.
No,
it's not. But it's something that I think most MVPs and most in the industry would be pleased to see happen.
Yeah, it would be nice. Again, I wouldn't have to do any of this if application rules worked.
Right.
I'm a big fan.
Yeah. The next one is a very good article on SQL Server security, explaining the different levels and what some of the terms mean. And next one is contained databases. Again, explains the purpose of them and how they work.
I have a question about that, because I read between that article. It appears to be indeed, as the link here says, making your database portable by putting some metadata in the database rather than in the master database.
Right.
I don't see how that helps you with security.
Right. Well, I mean, imagine if you want to move this database to another server, the more you can put on, and you want all the user accounts to go with it, just a copy, backup and restore. And actually, this article talks about Azure as a better way to do it. I think maybe the only way to do it is the accounts are in the database level, but there's quite a bit there about that, about the contained database and why you want to do it. In this case, it allows me to do what I'm doing by allowing the database to manage its own user accounts. If you have 15 different databases, you'd have to add those accounts to each one. Then it's really actually not hard, because you can do it in a loop. Because imagine if I want to change the encryption keys. Well, I can't do that because all the data is encrypted. What I'd have to do, and it wouldn't, when the database is quiet is I removed all those accounts using the old key, put in the new key, and put them all back in. Next day, people come in, they don't know the difference because they never knew they had to log in anyways.
And these 15 databases are on the same SQL server or on
Well,
a
I'm just being an example. If you had to put user accounts on all those databases,
Yeah.
But again, if you my front end has accounts already, always had accounts, so it always used users login information to configure what they can do, the menus, and some security at the record level, at the control level. So it wasn't no big deal to add an extra function to add all those users to the database.
Yep. Got it. Thanks.
Yep. And the last one is a Stack Overflow discussion about password limitations with SQL Server, and in their case, MySQL. Kind of handy. The biggest thing is it tells you which characters really have a problem with in connection strings. I'm sure there's a way to escape it, but it's really not important in my case.
Hey, Ron,
Yes.
is that a moose in Rocky Mountain National Park at Dream Lake?
Yeah, and that's
Oh, I called it.
yeah. We were there in July.
Nice. It's
We
by
went
my
up
house. I know exactly that area.
Yeah, and
I've been there
there's no
1,000
Photoshop.
times.
This is a phone.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yep. But we went up there for sunrise and walked around the lake and sat down because the moose was coming. That moose came in to eat. We sat there and watching him. And suddenly he started walking down the trail right at us. I said, "What are we going to do? We'll stay here." And he walked in the lake right there. I said, "Well, you can't beat that shot. That's a money shot."
Definitely.
Yeah.
I wouldn't approach them. I would walk away from them. They are mean. They've had some moose,
Yeah. This was the size of a horse, so this is a baby.
Yeah.
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 But that was cool. I mean, he was there for about half an hour, 45 minutes.
It's a great
pick. He's kind of giving us the eyeball right there, if you notice.
Mhm. Yeah.
So you in Colorado?
Yeah. Yep. I live in Lafayette, which is just outside of Boulder. Actually, I grew up not far from Estes Park in Jamestown, Colorado.
Yeah, we camped at Boyd Lake and then drove up there 3 times.
Nice.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Lovely area.
Oh yeah.
So, Ron, if you'd like to wrap up, I'll stop the recording whenever you're ready.
Okay. Last slide. I have a sample database that kind of tells you how to configure it. You got to add your connection strings, user ID and user login, set up user login. And as one of you asked about, you'd directly call those encryption routines to encrypt whatever you set up and then store that in the database. Put in your PIN value and encryption value. And that's, again, that would be in production, you'd pull it from a property of the database instead of typing it in. And if you want the read-only account, then you add the read-only account name and password. And the add tables form, you'd add your tables in there if you want to connect to them. Again, this is just a sample. Be easily to integrate with most applications. That's it. Wrap it up.
Fantastic. Any other questions or comments?
Wonderful work.
Thank you.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay,
Nice.
well, I think I'll give a quick preview of our coming attractions next month. Is November. Greg Reagan, who did a presentation for Kent's group last month, will come back to our group and do another interface enhancement presentation. I haven't seen it yet, but I have an outline of what it will be, so I won't preview it till I know exactly what he's going to do. But Greg is going to talk more about interface in Access. And in December, Crystal and Jeff are lined up. Do either
Yes,
of you
sir.
want to give us a quick preview of what you're going to talk about?
Oh, I guess you probably want me to start. It's about add-ins. You know, those are the cool little things. Oh, you know, when you write some really cool code and, yeah, where's that module? Let me go import it. Or that module and that form. Well, instead, you can just make an add-in that you install, and that cool thing that you wrote can just be available anytime you're in Access. So I'm going to talk about making an add-in that runs in Access. And then Jeff, your
Yeah,
turn.
I guess I was going to do a quick presentation on POM add-ins using the Visto tools in .NET and show how to make an add-in for Word from Crystal's properties database, Word properties database.
Okay, fantastic. We're looking forward to that.